It starts with a sound no one in the neighborhood could describe. A single, sharp echo at 2:17 a.m. that woke up 3 families, made dogs bark across the block, and left one man staring out his window convinced something terrible had just happened. But he couldn't see anything in the darkness, and by morning, life looked normal. No police cars, no commotion, no sign of danger, just a quiet suburban street that had no idea it would soon become the center of one of the most terrifying cases investigators had ever seen. A case so disturbing, so psychologically twisted, that even the most experienced officers admitted it made them lose sleep. And it all began with a missing woman whose disappearance didn't even make sense at first. Her name was Claire, 31 years old, a calm, quiet soul, who spent most of her time working from home as a digital illustrator. People described her as thoughtful, gentle, and withdrawn, but never unhappy. She lived alone, kept to herself, and had no drama in her life. Or at least that's what everyone believed. When she vanished, there were no break-ins, no forced entries, no signs of a struggle. Her house was locked from the inside. Her phone was charging on the table. Her shoes were neatly placed by the door. It looked like she had simply opened the door, stepped outside, and evaporated into thin air. Police initially thought she might have left voluntarily, maybe to clear her mind or take a break. But what they didn't know was that Claire had been living in fear for months. Fear she never shared with anyone. The first real clue was found by her neighbor, a man named Douglas. He went next door to check on her, after noticing her lights hadn't turned off for 2 days. When he peeked through the window, he froze. Her house looked abandoned. Food on the counter had gone bad. Her work tablet was still open on a half-finished drawing. And the strangest detail of all, every mirror in the house had been covered with sheets. That was the moment Douglas called the police, and within minutes, officers realized they were dealing with something far from normal. Missing person cases don't usually start like this. Nothing was broken. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was out of place except for those covered mirrors and a strange pattern of scratches on the bedroom floor that no one could immediately explain. The detectives assigned to the case were confused from day one. Claire had no enemies. She had no history of mental illness. She had no relationship drama. No financial issues. Nothing that pointed to a reason for her to run away or hide. But there was a pattern in the house. A feeling investigators couldn't shake. Something about the silence, the untouched objects, and those hidden mirrors made them think Claire wasn't trying to disappear. She was trying to hide from something. And the more they walked through the house, the stronger that feeling grew. On the 3rd day of the investigation, one of the officers discovered a journal taped underneath her mattress. The tape was old, fingerprints smudged from being handled many times, and inside the journal were entries that stopped detectives in their tracks. Claire had been hearing noises, soft footsteps in the hallway, breathing near her bedroom door, whispers behind the wall. She wrote about objects going missing, lights turning on by themselves, doors she didn't open being found ajar. She wrote that she felt watched every minute of the day. But the most disturbing entry was written 8 days before she vanished. It said, "I know he's inside. I don't know how he got in. I don't know where he hides. But he's here." Investigators immediately tore the house apart looking for hidden spaces, crawl spaces, attic entries, anything that could explain her fear. They found nothing. But later that night, something happened that changed the direction of the investigation forever. The forensic team discovered long, thin fibers inside the scratches on the bedroom floor. Fibers that didn't belong to the carpet, didn't belong to her clothes, and didn't match any furniture. They belonged to old insulation, the kind found inside walls. That discovery made detectives realize what Claire had feared wasn't just in her mind. Someone had been living inside her house. When officers returned with thermal scanners and audio equipment, they didn't find a person, but they did find temperature changes inside the walls, and a faint clicking sound coming from a place no one could reach without tearing the structure apart. Something or someone had been moving through the hollow spaces of the house. And even worse, they found a hidden hole behind her closet mirror, a hole big enough for someone to watch her through. The chilling truth hit everyone in the room at the same time. Claire had been watched for weeks, maybe months, and she knew it. That's why she had covered the mirrors. That's why she had been hearing footsteps. That's why she wrote those disturbing entries in her journal, and that's why the house felt untouched after she vanished. Because the person who took her didn't need to break in. He was already inside. What investigators didn't know yet was who he was, how long he had been there, or where he was hiding now. And then, just when detectives thought they had reached the darkest part of the case, someone found a piece of evidence so horrifying, it made one of the officers leave the room. Inside the attic, buried beneath insulation, they found a small, old-fashioned camera. On it was one video file, and in that video was Claire. The video began with complete darkness, just the sound of faint breathing, shallow and shaky, as if the person holding the camera was hiding, terrified to even inhale too loudly. Then slowly, the frame bright, a thin beam of light, revealed the narrow wooden interior of Claire's attic, the dust floating in the air like tiny ghosts. For a moment, nothing moved, and then Claire appeared in the frame, sitting with her knees pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around her legs, her eyes wide and unfocused. She wasn't tied up, she wasn't gagged, but she looked trapped. Trapped in a way that suggested she knew trying to escape would only make things worse. Her lips quivered as if she wanted to speak but couldn't, and behind her, in the farthest corner of the attic, the camera picked up a shadow. A human-shaped shadow that was standing perfectly still, as if waiting for the right moment to step forward. Detectives froze the frame and enhanced the lighting, and what they saw made every officer in the room stop breathing. A man was crouched behind her, his face barely visible, his eyes locked onto her with an expression that radiated pure obsession. He didn't move while the camera recorded, he didn't blink. He just stared at her, like she was no longer a person, but something he owned, something he had been studying, waiting for, claiming piece by piece. When the video continued, Claire finally whispered something under her breath. The audio was faint, almost inaudible, but when enhanced, the words became clear. He said he's been here longer than me. No one understood what she meant at first. But when investigators searched the house's building records, they discovered something that made their stomachs drop. The property was nearly 50 years old, and in the initial blueprint, there was an extra crawl space connecting several walls. A crawl space that didn't appear in the modern renovation plans, but one that still physically existed inside the structure. This meant the intruder hadn't just broken in. He had been living inside the house for an unknown amount of time, possibly long before Claire had even moved in, and he knew every inch of it, every weak spot, every hidden cavity, every shadowed corner she never knew existed. The thought alone was horrifying, but the truth was even more twisted. When forensic teams explored deeper, they found signs someone had built makeshift shelves inside the walls using scrap wood. They found food wrappers dating back months. They found a tattered sleeping bag. They found bottles of water, dozens of them, tucked behind wooden panels. And then they found something that made the entire crime scene turn from eerie to monstrous sketches. Hundreds of sketches. Some were old, some recent. All of them of Claire, different angles, different expressions. Some of her walking through the house, some sleeping, some brushing her hair, and some drawings showed her from places she didn't even know someone could see her from. The sketches weren't violent or graphic, they were worse. They showed obsession, an obsession so deep, so consuming, that it explained everything. The covered mirrors, the fear, the journal, the feeling of being watched. It had all been real, and now investigators had to figure out who this shadow inside her home was. They used the video, the sketches, the fingerprints from the attic, and the fibers found on the floor to assemble a rough profile. Male, likely in his 30s or 40s, extremely quiet, capable of surviving in confined spaces for long periods, and most importantly, deeply attached to Claire in a way that suggested he saw her as part of his world, a world he had constructed inside those walls. But the most disturbing question remained unanswered. Where was Claire now? 3 days passed as investigators expanded their search radius around the neighborhood, but on the 4th day an officer found something strange behind the property line. A piece of fabric, the sleeve of a sweater, caught on a rusted wire fence. It matched the same sweater Claire was wearing in the attic video. The search intensified, and after hours of moving through thick brush, They found a small hidden shed deep in the trees behind her house. It had no windows and only one door. When they forced it open, the smell hit them first. A cold, stale odor that made the air feel heavy. Inside, there was a mattress on the floor, a lantern, empty food containers, and on the far wall, carved into the wood with something sharp, were the words, "Don't worry, she's safe." But Claire wasn't there, and neither was the man. For a moment it felt like the investigation had hit a dead end. But then they found something wedged under the mattress, a small camera memory card. When they played the footage, it revealed the final moments before Claire disappeared completely. The video showed her sitting in the same shed, trembling, whispering to someone off camera. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I won't tell anyone. Please." Her voice cracked with fear, and then a soft reply came from the darkness. "I didn't come for you. I waited for you." The voice was calm, almost gentle, a voice that didn't match the horror of the situation. But what made the investigator's skin crawl wasn't the words, it was the sound behind them. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps, as if something else was in the shed with them. Then the video glitched, flickered, and ended abruptly. Investigators widened the search beyond the property line, through the woods, and into an abandoned drainage system that hadn't been used in years. It was there, inside a narrow, concrete tunnel, half submerged in water, that they found Claire, barely conscious, weak, terrified, but alive. When they carried her out, she whispered one sentence before blacking out. "He's still inside." Those 3 words changed everything. Because while officers rushed Claire to safety, another team stormed her house, determined to catch the man who had turned it into his personal maze. They searched the attic, the walls, the crawl spaces, every structure that could possibly hide him. Hours passed with nothing found. But as they prepared to leave, one officer heard a faint rhythmic tapping, coming from behind the wall right next to the bedroom. When they cut it open, the air from inside rushed out like a release of pressure, and there, standing completely still in the darkness, was the man. His eyes didn't react to the light. His body didn't flinch. He just stared at the officers, as if they were intruders in his home. And in a calm, chilling voice he said, the last words anyone expected, "You shouldn't have taken her." That was the moment investigators realized the truth. He didn't think he had kidnapped Claire. He thought he had saved her. And in his twisted reality, the real threat wasn't him at all. It was anyone who tried to take her away. The case ended with his arrest, Claire's survival, and a story that left even veteran detectives speechless. But the most terrifying part wasn't what he did. It was how long he had been there, listening, watching, waiting.